Hi, it's a pleasure to have you with us. How have you been?
Hi, Ashu. A great pleasure to be with you again on the show. Thank you very much. All is well here.
Karina, we have a very interesting topic at hand today. Before we dive in, I'd love you to introduce yourself to our audience. You've had a phenomenal career as a professional, and you've been the CEO of W Hub, co-founder and CEO of W Hub and Angel Hub, and you've been doing some splendid work there. It'll be lovely if you could run us through that.
Yes, thank you very much, Ashu. So yes, as you mentioned, I'm co-founder of W Hub and Angel Hub, and W Hub is the largest startup platform here, still proudly headquartered out of Hong Kong with over 500 partners around the globe. And Angel Hub is the very first and still only SFC regulated startup investment platform for professional investors and for growth stage companies that are scaling here in Asia. I'm also a very proud ambassador of Asia Berlin, which is an initiative of the Senate to Berlin in Germany. And I act also on a volunteer basis on several think tanks, one of the Hong Kong government by the Economics, Commerce and Development Bureau, right. The One Belt, One Road Startup Task Force, proud vice president of Thai Hong Kong. And you know that I have a lot of wonderful experience connecting with the Indian market. And I also volunteer at the school where my daughters go to as the president of the PTA there. Right. And you mentioned that, Asia was not originally a place where I was born. So I'm originally from Germany, but also have a French diploma and started my career with Procter & Gamble in France, right. And worked a lot in finance, but not only, also in sales, in strategy. That brought me also then here to Asia, first to Japan, 7 years, where I managed the Gillette integration, which was the biggest acquisition at that time, right. Of an FMCG company, which was very interesting. And then came here to Hong Kong already nearly 10 years ago. So, and here is truly where, with my co-founder, Karen, we discovered our passion for the startup scene and hence started building these two platforms that are all here to make a difference to the ecosystem.
Wow. That's been some journey, right? And I've had the opportunity of knowing you, at a personal level as well. And I think it's always so much more inspirational and interesting to talk to you. Thank you so much for taking the time out. Karina, I'm going to dive into my first question, right? And given that we're talking about growth of businesses across Southeast Asia, how has the year 2020 been, right? It's been a difficult year, we've known. But I think, certain economies in Southeast Asia have come out very well, out of, the pandemic, while some of us, are continuing to work our way through. How has been the overall scene across Southeast Asia?
Yeah, and just to put that a little bit into context, into background, sure. On W Hub as well as on Angel Hub, as you know very well, we're right. Sector agnostic. So really across industry verticals, we're technology agnostic. We do not only help our startups here from the region scale overseas globally, but also welcome global companies here. And right. What I always love to stress at the very beginning is there is no one size fits all. And when a general question, cannot really be honored by just a simple answer by saying, oh, yes, it was great, it was difficult. So right. Obviously the devil really lies in the detail, and same holds true for 2020. We have on both platforms, and interesting, we can dig a bit more on Angel Hub, on the investment platform, where we have our own fund and we co-invest. We have seen, very interesting situations where on the one hand side, obviously companies were struggling, needed to pivot their business model given that the pandemic had really requested and required for dramatic shift in consumers' behaviors. And on the other hand, companies that truly benefited, and arguably nobody better positioned than agile technology companies to really, take advantage of such a pandemic. So if you look into different industry, I mean, some industries have been relatively neutral to slightly, positively impacted by that when it comes to anything that is mindfulness, health conscious related. So obviously there is a big shift in consumer behavior and adoption there. But even more so when we get, for example, into financial technology and fintech, right, where one of the major barriers always for new players was to build up trust, right, to have that element of having consumers shift and adopt technologies. And that obviously has been pushed significantly. Same thing in the gaming industry, right, where, we joke and say now every day is a Sunday. So people, are behind their screens. And that really has obviously increased not only adoption, but also consumption in itself. And I compare that to my years when I was at Procter & Gamble, when we had a very breakthrough market opportunity, or let's say product development or technology that we had to bring to the market. If it was so breakthrough and so leaping, it really costed a lot of marketing dollars and a lot of patience to bring the consumer on board, to make these habits, these consumer shifts happen. Now this, from the pandemic clearly was leapfrog for many, and speed up. So we have examples of companies where we invested in that were looking to expand over 2020 into 2 different countries. And finally, they ended up expanding into over 80 countries within 3 months, just because all the solutions and also the way people consumed was put online. So this is definitely one sector. We do have other sectors that obviously have been heavily negatively impacted. So very similar to what is happening in more traditional industries or players, is when you think about everything that's travel related, obviously F&B related, everything that is around entertainment that had a very strong offline component. But here again, we see some of players, even one of our unicorns here in Hong Kong, Clue, right, that were really able to pivot their business model and adjust. But it obviously requested and required a way more dramatic and bigger shift in the current solution or in the previous solution.
Right. Also, Karena, you've been, at W Hub helping a lot of businesses, at an operational level, who want to sort of set up their base across Southeast Asia, right? Tell us a little more about that as well.
Yes, and I think maybe just to leverage on one more point that I wanted to add on the previous question was really when I said we could clearly differentiate the companies who were in this year raising growth capital because of capturing and being agile enough to leverage on these opportunities to have stronger onboarding and more consumption. And we had companies that were getting towards the end of their cash flow and hence really significantly struggled, because obviously in such a market, it's clearly a buyer's market. But coming back to your point, that's also where we truly want to help companies grow and scale. So one is obviously the fundraising platform, Angel Hub. And once again, it's open not only for companies that originate here from the region, but companies that are maybe started to incorporate in other parts of the world, but are wanting to scale and grow their business here in Asia. So that's the fundraising side for sure. And there is the crowd element to it on the platform, and there's our own fund that co-invests. But even before that, we do help companies also here to scale into the region with what we call our soft landing program, which are services that go beyond helping you to understand how to set up your company through the company registry, how to get your company secretary, how to open your bank account, how to get your co-working space. But it's really meant to soft land you in the epicenter of the ecosystem with all the connections that you need to the right, for example, corporate partners, for right government support, for right acceleration programs, for right community builders, events, the network that you would typically find in your home country and that you're used to know and hack in a way that it helps you scale your business. And this is really what we do. We exist since 2013. So we have established a network of really trusted partners and experts that can help you beyond just the pure, where do I open my bank account? Because particularly if you want to scale into Hong Kong and set your headquarter up here, it's so easy. The Hong Kong government has a website.
Right.
And you log on the website, and in an hour you have your company registered here in Hong Kong from
Wonderful.
wherever
Right.
you are in the world.
Karina, I mean, given that we're, at W Hub and, with the work that we're doing in India, yeah, I think with what we're doing with W Hub, we're trying to build a bridge between and Southeast Asia, right? Uh, what has largely happened when you look at the Indian tech ecosystem, Indian tech scene, right? Uh, a large part of companies that are working in the enterprise tech space have done a phenomenally good job when it comes to acquiring clients and customers and expanding into international markets, right? But when you look at a lot of other companies that are in the B2B side of things, startups that are in the consumer side of things, and now the D2C category, right? They've largely been inward looking, right? For some reason, not a lot of advocacy has happened around the possibility of exports, around the possibility of going internationally. Something that we've seen across countries like Israel, also America, for example, they've largely been built on exports, right? What do you think are some of the opportunities for Indian startups across SEA markets?
Yeah, I think actually you pointed out already in your question a big part of the answer, which I think is really awareness building.
Right.
And I think if we go back and trying to understand what does it actually really involve to export your solution into another country or scale inside a country. One of the things I was really intrigued in that I learned from visiting India several times, and going to Delhi, going to Mumbai, going to Bangalore, going to Hyderabad, going to Andhra Pradesh, like really it's not necessarily easy to expand your solution from Bangalore to Mumbai, neither, right?
Right.
It might sound a little bit more familiar, but I think that's where it's really interesting. If we go back to the core of what makes your company successful, is really trying to understand the problem statement that you're solving and how much similarities you may find in other markets. So there might be other markets, if you're a company, coming from Bangalore, that are much more prone to a very similar type of solution that you developed in your home market than other parts of India. And I think it comes back to really understanding really the pain points and the consumer in the market that you're trying to expand to. I think one of the reasons why Israel is scaled and exported so much is, on the one hand side, the size of the market, and same thing arguably for Hong Kong. If a company starts from Hong Kong having only 7 million population, you kind of like from day one understand that your own market won't be big enough. The other thing is also, when it comes to scaling, one is obviously finding more clients and opportunities to market, but it's also other resources such as fundraising. So one of the reasons that draw Israeli startups to the US, etc., was the fact that they had really breakthrough technology, and they were able to get fundraising opportunities outside of India much more of Israel, much more inside their own country. So coming back, yes, I think as you mentioned in the B2B space, particularly, it's interesting when companies scale into markets such as Hong Kong or Singapore, right? That when you come from India with cutting through technology with a great team, and we very often talk about the amazing talent, right, that exists in India, and you understand how to market it here, you clearly have the needs, and you have the opportunities that you can seize. I think very often people would not really just lack the awareness and maybe lack just the courage to say, look, I invented I don't know, BNPL solution that might work very, very well in Indonesia, right? And I might think I should first start exporting to that market.
Right. Karina, also, when you talk about all the support which is available, right? Government has also been playing a very, very active role, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, which are some of the leading, countries when it comes to SEA, right? Can you give us a sense of that, right? So Trade Hong Kong, for example, has been very, very active, right? You very closely at WHO work with them. Give us a sense of all the comfort and all the support through schemes and programs that they've been providing.
Yeah, very good. I'll get to that in a second. And again, I think one disclaimer upfront is important once again to just peel
Sure.
the onion, right? Because when it comes to certain government ads, it's really worthwhile trying to understand if some of these ads are available for companies that come from overseas.
Right.
So we and that is something where I when I compare for example Hong Kong to other places such as Singapore or so, is a very open market.
Right.
So, in other markets, you may come across amazing matching schemes where you hear the government puts $7 for any one private dollar,
Sure.
but then you realize that these ones might not be available if you're a company from overseas or if you're not a founder that holds the passport.
Right.
So again, particularly, I'm talking about Hong Kong. Very often, we say that the best way to describe our ecosystem is that it's very diverse, and that holds true with the different industry. That holds true in terms of age, in terms of gender, but definitely in terms of nationality. And
Right.
just the fact that 30% of our 9, soon 10 unicorns have been founded by international founders is just a testament to that. So to
Right.
your point about Invest Hong Kong, that we work very closely with, and some other government-backed organizations such as Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, HKSTP,
Right.
or Cyberport. One example is just coming up very soon, the big Start Me Up Hong Kong Festival, where W Hub with our flagship conference,
Right.
SIS, Scale
Sure.
Up Impact Summit, is the core event. And what we really try to drive there is, once again, what we already mentioned, very critical, the awareness about the opportunities, the possibilities,
Right.
and then connecting you really to these resources. So W Hub, as you know, is a job recruiting platform, is a platform that connects you to larger corporates for co-innovation programs through open innovation challenges or hackathons or
Right.
corporate-based acceleration programs, all of this, and then obviously the investor element, and Angel Hub backs the entire venture track. So this is something we put into place. And I think, once again, what is very important is, even though some of these government ads are things that you can find on a website, is just connect with people that are entrenched in the ecosystem there,
Right.
because again, they will help you to better understand what is the concrete program that could work for you, and also what are kind of like the do's and don'ts, and tips on how really to get elected and benefit from
Very
these
interesting.
programs.
Very interesting. Karina, this is a question that has often been asked, right? When you so regionality plays a very important role when you're looking to expand, right? How big is the cultural challenge, right, when you're looking to expand in Southeast Asia, right? Especially when you have countries like, for example, Indonesia, Malaysia, even Hong Kong, right, and Philippines, Vietnam. How big is the cultural challenge when you sort of wanting to expand into these markets?
If you ask me to answer the question in one word, I would say huge. And the reason why I would say huge is not to discourage people, but it's just, again, to put a big disclaimer
Right.
on getting back to the basics and never underestimating
Sure.
to scaling your solution into a different region. Now,
Right.
with that, again, I just would throw the ball back to you as well and say, I mean, how difficult is it to scale a solution across India? Or even,
Right.
if you live in a country as
Sure.
huge as India or even China, right? How difficult is it to
Right.
scale a solution across a huge market? Now, the thing is, what is really interesting, and we already talked about that, but I cannot stress it really enough, is getting back to what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and how similar is that problem felt by your target consumers in
Right.
that different market. So again, another of our unicorns here that we're very close to, Lala Move, when they expanded out of Hong Kong, they looked and said, well, let's go to Singapore, which is same thing, like
Right.
a few million people, it's very dense city, state. So probably would be an easy copy paste of the solution that they successfully scaled here.
Right.
And they miserably failed the first time. So they pulled out, firstly expanded then in other parts, and then went back on understanding. And I know we talked a little bit that and that's part of the benefits that I have having worked so long with P&G, you know, the go-to-market strategy. So first of all, really understanding the problem statement, but also then the marketing and the go-to-market strategy in different regions is really never to be underestimated. So we package that under like cultural differences, but very often it just comes also to different industry and market dynamics into different, you know, power plays in some, you know, when it comes to certain market stakeholders or inside the value chain, different players, you know, the force that they have, the power that they have, the understanding their own pain points, their advantages, all of that is very different. So again, in one word would be huge, because I don't want anybody to underestimate what it takes to scale. And once again, that's where I think it's really great to partner up either with other companies that have successfully done that, or again with people like you and me, who really have this as a passion to show companies, you know, how can you really scale and take advantage, and hopefully help you to avoid some of the pitfalls that you would do if you start from scratch all by your own.
Right. So, you know, we've been working together on the soft landing program. I know how you know, how institutionalized it is, you know, in terms of, you know, preparing a founder with, you know, all of these aspects, right? And I think cultural challenge is a massive challenge, and I completely agree with what you said, right? And like you said, right, scaling in India is a massive challenge, but then there are a variety of other reasons, you know, when you think scaling into India, right? Um, so
and maybe one thing actually to interrupt you there just was in terms of cultural challenge. I mean, I would still say, no, there's a big cultural difference to go from, you know, personally what I did from Tokyo and then visited and had, you know, business trips to Taiwan, to Hong Kong, to Singapore, to China. But arguably compared to, you know, moving from Europe to Asia, so the good news and the silver lining is, you know, that was definitely a way bigger cultural challenge. So again, all Asian companies and startups that are, you know, scaling here, again, it's probably
I think correct. So I think a lot of your first-hand experience is now sort of, you know, as part of the soft landing program. A lot of your experience that you've sort of moving from a market like Europe into Asia. I think there is a lot of that which we see. Karena, a question which is very often asked, right? At what stage should a startup or a business think of expanding into Southeast Asia, right? You know, and I think, you know, should it be at an MVP level? Should it be, you know, when you are at a point where you've acquired some customers, clients in your own backyard, in your own market, should that be the point, right? I have continued to look at a lot of technologies which I believe are a little too early for India, right? I wish they were there in a slightly more mature market, you know, either based out of, say, Hong Kong or Singapore, and then they could have had an opportunity to cater to a much larger audience which is available, right? The readiness of the market was higher in those markets, right? So what's your point of view on that particular bit, right? At what stage should a founder start thinking of expanding into SEA like region?
Yeah, and I love it because again, you have already given one part of the answer yourself, which is there are two elements of readiness that you have to assess. One is the readiness of the market that you're scaling into with, once again, your solution and your understanding of the problem statement and the entire market environment. But the other one is also your own readiness. And arguably, as much as there are no right or wrong answers, it always is a trade-off of time and money. Obviously, if you want to go fast, you would like to see as once you have a solution ready on the shelf, and then you will try to deploy it as much as you can around the world. But I think as a seasoned entrepreneur, or arguably, you know, a serial entrepreneur, you realize again how many things that you learn along the steps. And you know, when you look back at it in hindsight, you say, well, there's a lot of money, for example, that I could have saved by having had these learnings early on. And obviously that doesn't work. You have some of the learnings you really have to make yourself. So again, I think particularly when you expand in a different market where arguably would need to start from scratch on building business partnerships, again, that market understanding and penetration, if on top you add learnings that you can discover in your own home market in terms of, for example, certain marketing strategies that work or that don't work, also just in building your company when it comes on growing a team, right? Hiring people, how do you hire people? How do you retain people? How do you
Sure.
motivate them? All of these learnings. If you can come equipped with that, obviously the chances for you to be successful and hence maybe burn less money and do some of these costly mistakes that you can avoid, that is really good. But it is a trade-off with time, obviously. So if you want to go fast, then you go early and you try to learn at the same time simultaneously. But I would definitely encourage people first to fully understand also the cycle of learning.
Right.
And again, I think we're all by now really familiar what makes some startups successful in terms of this, lean startup methodology of thinking, right? And if you really have that incorporated, I think it makes you much more equipped to be successful in other markets. And I think also in terms of the psychological element, right? We all know it's tough and it's a hardship, but I think if you can come equipped with a certain understanding and thick skin already, it might be a little bit slower at the beginning, but it will be way more successful and then faster in the long run.
I have a follow-up question on that, right? As a founder, you're too close to the situation, right? You're dealing with too many complexities anyway, right? Irrespective of the market that you operate in, right? On a lot of occasions, your decision making, given the proximity with the situation and the market, right? Essentially, you sort of adjust and calibrate your mind to the market which is around you, right? On a lot of occasions, you don't realize that this is possibly something that I should have taken out, right? There was a much bigger market for that, right? How is it that a founder who's based in India can understand those possibilities, right? Is there some sort of a structure that W Hub offers in partnership with, say, Invest Hong Kong, some of the other countries that you operate in across Asia? So, is there something that a founder can sitting in his home country or her own country, home country, understand, certain dynamics about the other market?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would encourage any entrepreneur, regardless on where she or he sits, to really look at the very beginning when you start structuring your business model in doing an analysis that is global. So even for us, when we start, building up the investment platform,
Right.
our due diligence in terms of latest technologies, market trends, solutions that were out there on trying to understand how do people try to capture the problem statement that we set out to solve, which was connecting startups to investors and connecting investors to startup investing opportunities. And that is something that truly helps, because it really helps you to ask yourself the right questions, all of these questions. And we know that as experienced entrepreneurs, that neither the ideas nor the pain points that we face are unique to us, and probably at least 1,000 other people had that before us or at the same time that we're looking into it. So that anyway helps you even to fine tune your own solution for your own market. But it also helps you to identify where might be the opportunity to go next.
Right.
And to your point, in terms of what we do at W Hub, and part of the initiatives that we do in collaboration with Invest Hong Kong, or also with corporate partners, is to provide information. So our white papers that we have on the platform that are open there for free for everybody to download really are meant that. First thing, creating awareness on how does the state of the ecosystem look. And we have a general one for Hong Kong, we have a fintech specific one, and we have a GBA, a Greater Bay Area specific one, right? And in there, again, same approach. We not only talk about infrastructural opportunities, we showcase the startups that are operating in the space. So again, for you, better to understand what is the competitive landscape. So maybe there are people in the same space. Have a look, do your due diligence on them. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why you might be best positioned to provide an even better solution. So that's one thing. The other thing, and then you might argue, again, COVID might be a blessing in disguise, is a lot of these networking events, these events on workshops, talks, are now taking place online. Right. So you can zoom in any given time into a workshop that talks about, for example, retail trends in Europe, or coming back to the Asian point, right, on what is what are the progress that financial inclusion has been given in Indonesia. So that is one of the reasons why when we were put in front of the problem, should we hold our flagship conference or should we cancel it? And should we hold it online or cancel it? We said, well, holding it offline is not an option anymore. The convention center was closed, but putting it online arguably may now even offer the opportunity on giving insights and making connections on a global level. And that's what happened. You remember last year we had over 97 countries that tuned in.
Right. Karena, I will come to that, right? I would want you to talk towards the end of the conversation, about SIS, right? And I have experienced this personally. It's an extremely powerful platform. I think the kind of effort that you and your team put in to bring in all the stakeholders together across geographies is absolutely phenomenal, right? And the kind of intelligence and the exchange of thoughts and ideas that happen is absolutely phenomenal, right? I would want you to talk about that towards the end of the conversation, right? But my next question, right, is, and I know it's there is a certain context that you'll have to give to this, is that which is the right city to create a base in SES. So, for example, if I realize that my solution is something which is relevant across all the markets, right, which are out there, or at least 70-80% of the markets which are out there, which is a country that I should look to operate out of or create a base out of, right? I mean, some of the active countries or some of the active regions are essentially Hong Kong, Singapore. Jakarta has picked up in a big way. How should I decide that, and what should be part of my decision making process?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what you mentioned is absolutely right. And if we even look outside of the tech scene in the broader spectrum of the markets, there's a reason why Singapore and Hong Kong are these regional hubs. And I think when it comes to then trying to understand where you should set up your headquarter, I think the first thing I always love to mention is the question about either or, should I go either to Singapore or to Hong Kong, is the wrong question, because at the end of the day, you want to scale your solution successfully across the Asian market. So you have to be in both, right? So you have to be, when you're coming from India, certainly in some of the hubs in India, you have to be in Bangalore, you probably have to be in Delhi, you may also have to be in Hyderabad or in Mumbai, and then you have to be in Singapore and in Hong Kong, and then you even have to be somewhere in China if you're thinking about growing into the entire Asian market. The question of sequence is exactly, I think, how I would like to answer your specific element to what are the elements that you need to consider, right? So one of the elements that you need to consider is, again, in terms of, are you leveraging that headquarter for what type of part that you need for your business? Is it as a market? Is it a testing ground? Do you want to have a diverse consumer base, which you can clearly have in Hong Kong and in Singapore? But then in Hong Kong, for example, you have way better access to the Chinese market than you have in Singapore. In Singapore, I would argue you maybe have quantity-wise more opportunities to better connect with the Southeast Asian markets like Indonesia, Philippines, etc. I think the other point when it comes to government support, right? We already touched on that a little bit. Make sure that you understand the support is available in your industry, is available for you as a foreign company, and that is very important. The other one, when it comes then to really expanding your solution into the broader Southeast Asian and Northeast Asian markets, is the business contacts and partners. Right. So, for example, even ourselves, and we could seem to be a bit biased because we started out of Hong Kong, but I think where Hong Kong really has a great advantage is, as I mentioned again, very, very inclusive. Even if it comes to recruiting talent, the immigration policies are much lighter than in any other part here in Asia. So you can hire, for example, a spouse of somebody who has a visa here, which is not possible in Singapore, which is not possible in other parts of the world. You can very easily find here business partners that will be able to soft land you in China. And I think one of the advantages that you will find in hubs like in Hong Kong and in Singapore is that you have people here that very often come from an expansion themselves, that have feet in at least 2 different geographies, right? In 2 different countries or regions that have their business network and contacts and that have that know-how on helping you. And it's interesting to see, a few examples, just to take Hong Kong with some concrete examples, where we see companies that are scaling into China, and yet, they have been here. They would do that with business partners that they have found here and connected here with. And then, leapfrogging just to make sure, again, that the landing is soft and as soft as possible for you to understand the market dynamics and to have the right introductions to business partners that you need.
Super. You know, okay. When you're looking to expand, Karina, right? Regulatory challenges, how you incorporate is another very, very tricky issue, right? How do you suggest one does that, right? When you're looking to sort of expand, right? Do you come in test waters through partnerships, before you think of incorporation, or do you suggest that, thinking of a more stable, uh, you know, uh, uh, plan of action helps you in a variety of other ways? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, and I like that you're touching on a very important point when it comes on markets and industries that require really big attention towards regulation.
Right.
And I think it's an element that I'm not sure if I highlighted it clearly enough in the question before, actually, where the power of having a really dense and concentrated ecosystem is very important. So one of the mistakes that someone could sometimes make is to confuse the ability to help you scale your business with an addressable market size.
Right.
So very counterintuitive going into Hong Kong, which is relatively small, might think like, wow, why would I do that? The market is very limited. It's again the fact that you have access to not only players such as us, but also associations that you can find very easily, because once again, the ecosystem is very well connected and highly concentrated, that then help you to better penetrate the regulatory environment. One concrete example in the fintech space here. So we actually have been very much involved in fintech, becoming a fintech ourselves. And my co-founder is even a founding board member of the Fintech Association of Hong Kong. So this is an association, and you have other examples, and you have smart city associations, you have associations that actually work, for example, if you're in an area of sustainability and impact, then these organizations very often allow you to meet different stakeholders from an industry. So in fintech, you have the regulators involved, you have the incumbent banks involved, you have the fintech, the rising fintech companies, you have the big four, you have university, academia, you have government bodies, you have private players. So again, these are amazing think tanks that really allow you to understand and penetrate the market environment very, very quickly.
Right.
And then from there, yes, you can fine tune. So once again, it's all about, fine tuning your solution, adapting it to a new market. And from there, then you can scale it much, much faster and, with less pitfalls along the way. So I think that is very, very important to consider. And if you go into, very, very big countries, and even the other way around, companies that are trying to penetrate the Indian market, they're like, where do I start, right? Our regulations are actually the same across the country. How do I get in touch with the right players to find that? So again, that's the advantage of really going ultra focused, ultra small at the beginning, and then basically explode from there.
Very interesting. I think what you highlighted, I think, is so much more important, right? Decision making and the seamlessness that you're talking about is something which is very, very important for business. And what I read in what you're saying is that having a tangential arrangement is not in the best interest of the founder and the business, right? If you're looking to expand, if you are sure that this is what the market that you want to be operating in, having a firmer ground is a better thought than having a tangential temporary sort of a revenue, right? And I think that's a point that I completely buy. Karina, I have
maybe one thing just to build on, and I think a way to capture it very crisp is we talked about that from once again even companies going into India or going into China and thinking, wow, this is an amazing market. If I only have 1% of this entire market, I can already become rich. But the problem is, you rather have one solution with one customer and start building on from there than going with 20 different solutions into a market and not even finding one customers. And I think this is really the pitfall that very often people make when they look into an ecosystem and how to set up shop.
That's a very interesting point that you highlighted. Karena, also, what comes to the mind of a founder, right? And this is something that I've very often come across, right? Is that if you're expanding into a new market, right? Is it important, and what are your thoughts that in terms of building a team, right? Now, do you build a team with a regional depth, or do you sort of go on to say that, listen, I have my technology team, which is, say, for example, in India or whichever country that the founder is coming from, and I have a reasonable hold which is there, and and I'm going to build a transactional team or a business growth team within the city or the country of my operation, right? Is that an ideal way to look at it, or should a founder sort of or an entrepreneur think in a slightly different way, where he says or she says that I'll have to build a team from scratch for this particular market? Is that the right way to think, or do you think existence where you have parts of your team in your home country and parts of your growth team in the country of your business, is that the right balance, or do you think there are other alternatives?
Yeah, I think balance is important. So I think going extreme either way is not going to work in the long run. So extreme either way would be to totally recruit a team from scratch in that new country, and let it go and run. They will build a different company. So that's really not, and I think it's really on, again, the trade-off between understanding the market that you're expanding in. So really having local know-how, having also that being cultural versed in terms of doing business is really, really important. But you also have a strong passion and culture that you're coming from, right? Team culture, business cultures, and an understanding on, once again, very basic, the problem statement and how your solution is going to make a difference. Basically, how your solution is going to revolutionize and change the world. And so you need that. You need that, because if not, and we all know that, if there's a lack of company culture being exported to that new market, a totally different culture will build. So there's no company with no culture. So either you impose your own culture, or a different culture will obviously form. On the other hand, if you think that you can just come in like Rambo into a new market and impose basically your solution, we also know that that's not going to work. And we talked about it in the previous question in terms of cultural differences, and even some of pitfalls and faux pas that you just would like to avoid to successfully scale your company. I think I cannot stress it enough, and I'm a huge believer in diversity, in diversity that I look at not only in terms of gender, but really look in terms of background, in terms of different nationalities, and that in our team, if we have 2 or 3 members that have the same passport, we start becoming a bit nervous, because we feel like we're becoming too homogeneous. But joke aside, I think I just the perspectives. And if you want to cater to markets, particularly here, Hong Kong, Singapore, or then even branch out to Asia with so many different consumer profiles, you want to have that understanding of that diverse consumer base that you're targeting inside your team, for sure.
Awesome. I think that gives us a very fair perspective. Karena, we've talked about so much, right? And I think what continues to be very, very important to every founder, every entrepreneur, is the availability of funds, right? How large is or how exciting is the fundraising opportunity in Hong Kong, across Southeast Asia? One typical problem that founders face is, when they're looking to raise money in India, is that closures take a lot of time, unless the opportunity is very, very visible, right? Given that Hong Kong, Singapore are far more cosmopolitan markets, the understanding of complexities and issues is so much more superior, and the decision making is for the region. How exciting is the fundraise scene?
Yeah, so Ashu, I obviously would love it to be way more exciting, but I think what is truly exciting already is the fact that it became so much more exciting over the past years. So I think in Hong Kong, particularly, just to take it as an example, we're really blessed on having a financial services and investment scene that is there throughout the life cycle, right?
Right.
So we have the highest density of high net worth individuals in the world, and we also have a lot of people who start companies being bootstrapped. So
Right.
that very first part of bringing your company to a scale where you want to open up your capital in a larger way, is normally typically not a big bottleneck here.
Right.
We also, just to come from the other spectrum, right, with the Hong Kong Stock Exchange now being really the major fundraising place here in
Right.
Asia, arguably even worldwide, as we have overcome the London Stock Exchange in terms of valuation, and even when Alibaba listed, in terms of listing volume, became bigger as the New York
Right.
Stock Exchange, and a lot of very well established PE firms, ones that are cross border, by the way, right? So obviously we also have the very active Chinese unicorn captors, the Tencent, Alibaba,
Right.
etc. Very, very active here. So we do have what arguably was a little bit missing, and that's why we're so thrilled that with Angel Hub now we can provide that, was the bridge between angel investing and institutional money. So anything between $1 million and $5 million. So with that, you now have here in Hong Kong really a full value chain of investing from really early seed all the way to successful exit. And I think what obviously helps a lot is the fact that we have been able to produce several success cases. So with that, people's mindsets start shifting, also because some of the other asset classes may not be as lucrative anymore. So typically people here were investing into real estate or unlisted companies. And now I think given with that really entire ecosystem that is much more thriving, with that also more accessible, we really see more capital flowing, which is truly great. And I think what is also interesting that we see, maturity here used to be a little bit more actually a hinderer for people to go earlier stage, because they were more used to looking into several years of audited books and projections that were backed by hypotheses that were validated over the past. So now here more and more investors understand that the earlier stage you go, the more important it is also to look into the capabilities of the team, to go fast, to learn fast, to pivot. And it's interesting because once somebody described to me Silicon Valley as geeks becoming successful and reinvesting into geeks. So arguably they knew exactly what they were investing in. Even so, we didn't have that too much here in the past, but now through obviously platforms such as ours, but also other success cases, other venture capitals that came from outside, really started creating more interest in terms of investing. And I think that's something that I think find really intriguing if I look at the Indian market, because I think also the more you will be able to attract capital from outside, the more it will also help the inside market and inside investors to understand that they're potentially missing out on opportunities. Because here, we have investors who did not invest into Tencent, 15, 20 years ago, and are were thinking like, oh, I did a big mistake. And, now we can come with that narrative and telling them, look, you don't want to do the same mistake right now, again, right? 20 years later. And hence, I think that that is really, really fascinating to see, because when we started off, that was one of our reasons why we started off, because we really wanted to ensure that this was given. So
super interesting. Karina, my follow-up question on this one is, with the money, right, and these investors coming on board, right, given the exposure is very global, right? How helpful is that, right? Because money is, of course, what you want, but you also want a directional hand holding. You need somebody to be a sounding board, right? You know, how global is that? You know, the process of handholding, right? And you know,
Yeah.
co-founders.
Yeah, and I think that is another very important point. And again, it's also something when we talk about, access and know-how and problems that we solve. Because as you pointed out, the earlier stage you go, the more important it's not only to assess a company where it is, but
Right.
also trying to understand how quick and fast it can go and what additional resources are needed. So in
Yeah.
startup language, we talk about the smart part of the money, right? So again, if you go like later stage VC PE, that's basically capital, right? There's a little bit less of understanding on what else of
Right.
infrastructure needs to provide. So this is something where again, Angel Hub and W Hub work in a very symbiotic way. And when I say
Right.
W Hub, I talk about the community that has another 500 partners across the world that will chime in and help the founders to really understand how and where they can recruit, how to expand, how to get POC, for example, opportunities, with major customers, visibilities through, conferences and webinars. So that is very, very crucial. And I'm very happy that you're pointing that out, because obviously when it comes to investing, you want to de-risk as much as possible. And for early stage investing, the way that you can de-risk is really understanding how you can help these companies, either through your own know-how and connections, or having trusted partners around the region or even globally that can help further scale and accelerate these businesses.
Very interesting, Karina. At at W Hub, you've been running some very, very exciting programs for startups that are looking to, grow into the Southeast Asian region. You've spoken about it. Would love you to throw some light, very quickly on what can startups, you know, uh, learn and from being part of this program.
Yeah, thank you. So on W Hub, our hashtag is startup passion, right? Because we're very passionate about helping startups grow and scale and developing the entire ecosystem. That's why people call us the power connector or the ecosystem accelerator. And I think it's important for you to understand, if you're listening, regardless which stage you are in, you are more than welcome. So W Hub is really a very open and inclusive platform where we take people that are sitting in a Starbucks, thinking about a problem statement, becoming passionate, and then trying to develop a solution. Very often get their very first presence on the internet by registering their profile. It's for free. There's no membership. There's no hidden cost involved. And from there, we start by showcasing not only your product and service, but your own passion, because that's the second meaning to passion. We truly believe it's the most important asset you have to attract talent, to attract investors, to attract clients. And from there, we make these connections happen, right? So recruiting, soft landing, helping you to expand geographically, connections to co-innovation programs with established corporates, and then all the way to that education piece. So we talked about the white papers, we talked about SIS, our flagship conference, and I love to describe SIS as us putting the 365 days in a year into 2 days of a conference where you have the most powerful networks, the best insights, and you get hopefully once again the most beautiful experience in being connected with the tech ecosystem.
Karina, my last question to you, before we wrap up this session, why should founders prioritize to grow internationally? While of course they continue to build for their own markets. Your comment.
I think it's always very healthy to start with I want to conquer the world mindset from the very beginning. And as we talked and touched on a little bit, I think even for already capturing your own market, it is very beneficial to look into a market analysis in a global level, because it really helps you to benefit. I think to your point, more particular now, if you take the time to understand the problem that you're solving, how much does that exist in other markets, and maybe in other markets being even more predominant, being maybe even less treated, being even, and we talked about Hong Kong being highly concentrated, but still relatively small, less competitive. So you might find really kind of like a paradise or haven where you can exactly find the same problem statement with way less competitive edge, with maybe more infrastructural help. And we talked about it, and it could be anything, not only, ads, it could be, access to the internet. It could be here in Hong Kong having access to, social media, where, Facebook, LinkedIn, where 70% of the population is on these social medias, right? So you really get your word out much faster. It could be the fact also that people are, really highly mobile first oriented. So if you have a solution that you want to scale that is mobile first, so you might, be better informed to go to Hong Kong, Taiwan first, because that's how consumers behave. So I think the awareness piece that we said is really critical, that you force yourself to understand that the best way to successfully, bring your solution to market might not be trying to change too much your home country, but finding, an environment in a different market that's much more prone for you to be successful early on.
I think I'll just quickly add, there are like a few thoughts that I had, and also the fact that you can build these countries being very cosmopolitan, right? A lot of people who travel from outside and settle here, right? I think you can really create a foundation which is very, very cosmopolitan, and also very important for global growth, right? If you continue to sort of only stay invested in the country that you're building for, I think beyond the point, you are largely inward looking, right? The possibility of going into international markets, is very limited in that sense, right? But Karina, like always, it's a pleasure to speak with you. It is fantastic having you over and talk to us about the possibilities of growth across Southeast Asia. Thank you so much for taking the time out.
Thank you so much, and it's always a pleasure to be connected. And I can't wait to be physically back and see you.
And we look forward to hosting you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.